CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Nature is declining globally at rates unprecedented in human history, and the rate of species extinction is accelerating. According to a report from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction, and this will have a grave impact on humanity. During the opening session of the UN Summit on Biodiversity in September, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated, "We need to rebuild our relationship with the natural world to avert the worst impacts of the climate crisis and recharge biodiversity for the benefit of people and the planet." The extinction of species across the world due to rapidly increasing human populations is nothing new, but the devastating effects of these are multiplying exponentially. This week, we'll look at the impact accelerated extinction of species is having across Africa and what we can do to reverse this alarming trend. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Well, humans and animals are increasingly coming into closer proximity, and often biodiversity is being threatened by human activity. In Kenya's Samburu County, communities are being taught how to reduce conflict between people and wildlife. Often these conflicts are caused by competition for pasture and water. My colleague Enoch Sikolia brings us more.
He's leading his father's livestock from a water point along the Ewasongiro River. It's a journey that will see this herdsboy cross right through the Samburu National Reserve, the home of lions, elephants, and leopards. We are right inside the Samburu National Reserve, and in here we've seen young boys graze their livestock, sheep, goats, donkeys, and cattle. There is always danger, you know, but they say they know how to survive.
Sometimes when looking after the livestock, I encounter elephants and lions. If that happens, I run.
In this reserve, herders and their livestock share pasture with wildlife. Elephants are the largest living animals to walk these areas. Besides their size, these gentle giants are intelligent creatures and can smell danger or the presence of another animal or human being from a distance. This elephant attribute can be a danger for herders.
An elephant only gets aggressive when disturbed, but you can pass close to it if it doesn't get your smell. But it will charge at you even if you are far away, if it smells you.
And so these young boys are taught how to monitor wind patterns to ensure it doesn't blow their smell towards animals like elephants. These lands are also home to lions. In northern Kenya, lions and elephants always roam outside the protected areas, and as they move out, they get into some of these conflict zones around these villages where livestock are often the only source of food for the community. For the young herders, survival depends on the mastery of this one lesson.
We tell them to always climb a tree when they see a lion. If they are under a tree, a lion can attack them.
Historically, herders from Samburu have poisoned and shot lions in retaliation for attacks on their livestock or people. That was the genesis of the partnership program between the Samburu National Reserve, various conservancies, and the people of Samburu living around parks.
Don't shout, don't run to them, try to disappear slowly by slowly, and you know, elephants doesn't like noises.
Leparayo says this is more about helping people protect themselves and their livestock, and in the end, protecting wildlife and the environment. Anoxycolia, CGTN, Samburu, Kenya.
And joining me now to unpack Africa's extinction crisis from Nigeria, Olumide Idowu, the co-founder, International Climate Change Development Initiative. In Nairobi, Paula Kahumbo. She's the CEO of Wildlife Direct and one of the founders of the Hands Off Our Elephants campaign. And Philip Murudi, Vice President, Conservation Science and Planning Species Protection at the African Wildlife Foundation. Thank you all for joining us on the program. Philip, let's start off with you because all around us, the devastating impact of humans on nature is being seen more and more, whether it is through industry climate change, encroaching population growth. What is the reality on the ground? How bad is the destruction?
It is actually documented that things are not good. If you look historically, we have lost a lot of habitat, and we have lost both in terms of size and in terms of variety. And with that too, we have lost some species. Even in Africa, we have some species which have gone extinct, and some are at the verge of extinction. So overall, we're not doing very well. Some strides, positive strides have been made, but there's a lot of work that still remains to be done. And this is important for human well-being and for our own health, for our own well-being.
Give us a little bit of some specifics, Philip, because you talk about that overall we've lost a lot of species. What exactly are we talking about here? Because a report recently talked about, up to 1 million species being lost as a result of destruction from humanity. What exactly is being lost?
If you look at the data, 33% of our amphibians and 20% of mammals are in danger of extinction. Let me give you a very large mammal that just went extinct in 2012, the rhino that occurred around Cameroon and around Chad. This is during the period that you and I were still at our jobs. And there are many examples of this. There are species which are remaining very few numbers that are also at the verge of extinction, species like grave zebra in Kenya, for example. So this trend, and there are plants which have gone extinct, birds which have gone extinct. Extinction is forever. And with it goes any service, ecological service or good like medicine that plants would have offered.
Paula, you're in conservation, and scientists are showing, as Philip has mentioned, that the number of living animals on Earth has plunged by half since 1970. Let's look at closer home now in Africa, and particularly in Kenya. What's being hardest hit, and why is this the case?
We have a very serious problem of habitat loss and degradation. We are one of the countries considered to be mega diverse, and that means we have a very large number of species because we have many different kinds of habitats, from the driest deserts, mountains, oceans, savannas, and everything in between. And habitat change caused a lot by human population growth, but also conversion of land to agriculture, to industry, and that kind of thing, the damming of rivers, the draining of swamps, the overfishing in our coral reefs and in our lakes. These are all affecting our wildlife. Pollution is coming up as also another major threat. But I would say that, Philip mentioned a particular species, the black rhino. There are many species that are on the brink of extinction, species that are what we consider megafauna, the large animals, rhinoceros, elephants, grave zebra, giraffes, lions, cheetahs, pangolins. These are species which are currently on the brink or declining very rapidly as a result of trade in their parts. So I would say that in Kenya, we've seen a decline of nearly 80% of many of our species, largely due to habitat change and loss, and that's due to human population growth. But the mega species, the iconic species of Africa that we're so proud of, they are going very rapidly because of demand for their parts outside of our country.
Olumide, I want to get your thoughts. This accelerated extinction of species, we're hearing from Paula that 80% of species in Kenya particularly are, going to be extinct. Olumide, what is the scenario in parts of West Africa? We've also heard about the rhino that is now extinct. What is the situation in parts of West Africa? And generally, what has been the impact of this?
I think from what my colleague have just said, basically a lot of things are actually the same phase that is happening to the ecosystem basically. And one of the things is because of the contribution of human, because of the way we manage this habitat and the way we contribute to the extension of this habitat. And that is what is actually making most of them to run away or to extend from where they're supposed to be. And I think the only thing that can make us to achieve more in getting them and making them safe for humanity is for us all to collaborate and see how we can accept this kind of species and make them to also have the sense of enjoying the ecosystem. And once again, it's also something that we need to look into by making our rules and policies work for some of our habitat as well. It's very key and it's very important for our system, for the environment, and for the people. Thank you.
Philip, you mentioned an interesting point here, and you talked about extinction being forever. Let's take a step back for a minute, because we've heard for many years that biodiversity and ecosystems are essential for human survival. What is biodiversity exactly? Why exactly is it important?
Biodiversity is a term that was coined around 1985, which is basically a contraction or just a short form of biological diversity. That is the totality of life as it exists on Earth today and the interactions between its various components. So the genetics, the species, the habitats, that's biodiversity. Humans are a part of biodiversity. And so that the importance of that is humans depend on the biodiversity, the species themselves, the habitats in which they occur, and those processes that support them. So, for example, we get our food from biodiversity. We get our medicines from biodiversity. We get clean air. We get clean water from biodiversity. So, if we don't take care of the environment and biological diversity that it brings, we will ourselves suffer. That is the importance of it. And our development blueprints are built upon the notion that we shall have a clean environment and we shall have the environment providing those services and goods. So that is the importance of this, and this is why summits like the one we just had happened, the Global Summit on biodiversity is also important. What is the future of humanity without biodiversity? I would say none. Without a clean environment and good conservation practices, we have no future on this.
So, Paula, you did talk about 80% of species in Kenya, becoming extinct. And even as we talk about the importance of biodiversity, there was an article in the National Geographic that spoke of pastoralist communities in Kenya poisoning, wild animals who are destroying or eating their livestock. This does not just kill the animals, though, that are being targeted by the pastoralists. What is this doing to the environment? What is this doing to the ecosystem?
First, I just want to make a correction. I didn't say 80% are extinct. I said there is an 80% decline in most species of megafauna in Kenya over the last 15 to 20 years. And the predators are among those species which are most heavily affected. The pesticide poisoning of predators which are in conflict with the communities living out in the savanna areas, it's a major problem. If we think about why are wildlife species declining, there are the direct causes, the poisoning of lions or hyenas, and sometimes the unintended consequences, the collapse of vultures, which are also feeding on the same poisons. But what are the contributing factors? The contributing factors are that African nations are importing pesticides that are deadly. They are actually banned in the countries where they are produced. And what we're doing is allowing these deadly chemicals into our countries where they are being misused or abused due to ignorance or intention to kill wildlife animals in order to reduce the problem of human-wildlife conflict. Well, the reason why we have this conflict, and we see it whether it's railways and development threatening our savanna ecosystems, is because we have not yet done enough on our policies. In the case of animals in a place like Masai Mara, which accommodates more than 30% of all of Kenya's large mammals, the use of pesticide poisons to kill predators like lions will have a massive knock-on effect. but we need to look at it in the context of agriculture. Why doesn't the Ministry of Agriculture work together with the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife to ensure that these deadly chemicals do not get into the hands of the wrong people, and that some of these chemicals are not even permitted in the country in the first place, because they don't just threaten big cats, which is what we see because they are iconic. These pesticides are being used in our farming. That means we are consuming it in our rice, in our vegetables, everything.
You have raised a point there, Paula, because you have talked about we have not done enough when it comes to policy formulation, you know, to protect our environment, protect our ecosystem. Where are we with that?
Well, I was really, really thrilled to see that President Uhuru Kenyatta was one of the leaders to host the Leaders Pledge for Nature last week. This was really important. It means that Kenya has made a political statement, and that political will is essential. It has been missing. I won't lie. It's been missing, and it's the reason why we have seen threats to wildlife across the whole nation. We're losing land, we're losing corridors, we're losing dispersal areas. And even our national parks are shrinking because they're being nibbled and taken for various developments, especially for industry and transport. We need to see nature, biodiversity, climate change, and environment as central to our philosophy for the thriving economy that we all aspire for.
All right, and we will be looking at that question of implementation and accountability in just a moment. But for now, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more on what can be done to stop the extinction of plant and animal species across Africa. Stay with us.
Life moves pretty fast. Ideas move at the speed of sound. Technology moves at the speed of light. If you don't filter out the noise, you might miss the details. We pay attention to the details because they matter, showing you a different perspective. See the difference.
Welcome back to Talk Africa. Still with me are Olumide Idowu, Paula Kahumbu, and Philip Muruthi. Before the break, we looked at how Africa has been impacted by extinction. Let's now take a look at the possible solutions to this for the continent. Philip, let's talk about implementation, because at a UN conference on biodiversity in September, world leaders pledged to preserve biodiversity by committing to reverse the loss of biodiversity by 2030. Exactly what does this mean, and what exactly are the leaders pledging to do?
I think the leaders are pledging to us that, well, first of all, they are pledging to us that our lives are going to be good, they're going to be enjoyable, they're going to have pollinators, they're going to have food security, because it's all linked up. So when I listen to the pledge, what I hear is that, Philip, you'll get good and clean air, good clean water. If I live in Nairobi, I'm not going to have water shortages, because the Abadeas, where about over 80% of Nairobi's water comes from, the Abadeas, forests, and national parks have been safeguarded so they can provide me with the water. I'm also hearing that my food security is going to be okay, because the butterflies, the bats, and the birds, all the pollinators for the crops have been safeguarded. And what I'm hearing is that I can be able to enjoy the open spaces, and I can be able to get to a national park and enjoy my wildlife. I'm basically hearing from my leaders that I'm getting this pledge of where nature, conservation, and development and economic development are balanced very well. Sort of I'm hearing that a pledge from my leaders to have a green growth, green development. So where you balance. You don't do one at the detriment of the other. That's what I'm hearing.
Paula, there have been many conferences in the past, though, on the environment and protection of species. Have we had any real gains in slowing the loss of species globally? And is that also what you heard coming out of the UN Summit on Biodiversity?
I heard during the summit, many of the leaders, and there were more than 72 global leaders, made pledges. And they were very clear that this is urgent, that we cannot continue as we've been going, that the pressure that we are putting on natural ecosystems is not sustainable. And basically what that means is we are going to use up everything, and we will have no future, which I think is a very powerful statement. The gains that have been made, there are some gains. For example, in the past, we've had conferences around protecting certain areas of land, and it's now more or less agreed by scientists that we need about 30% of our land must be secured in its wild state. Unfortunately, less than 30% of land on planet Earth remains wild. When it comes to the ocean, less than, I think, 5% or so of the ocean is actually protected. And so the leaders of the world also committed to rehabilitating or restoring the biodiversity in these areas in order to deliver on these promises. They said they would do this in several ways. One of them was on green energy, and we have seen global shifts around energy. Kenya, for example, is investing very heavily in wind, in geothermal energy, which now contributes majorly to our energy. We have very little energy from petroleum and no energy from coal at the moment. We have also seen pledges around water and protection of forests and watersheds. Now, forests are really the treasure troves of biodiversity on this planet, particularly rainforests. And although many commitments have been made, I would say in my country, Kenya, we are doing very poorly. We have less than 1.5% of our original rainforest in its wild condition. And that number still goes down, but enormous efforts are being made in replanting and trying to restore these forests.
So what are the urgent measures, Olumide, that can be done? What are the urgent measures that need to be done today to move that conversation forward?
First thing that we need to do is for we people, to acknowledge that biodiversity is something that is urgent and we need to start doing something about it. Secondly, our government to also accept that there are a lot of things that have gone along the side, not making this ecosystem to be conducive for everybody. They need to acknowledge that, and we need to look at what kind of funding mechanism that we need to make sure that this industry or this sector starts accepting or starts seeing changes in it, because funding is very, very key. We need funds to push and to drive this solution for our sustainability, and also the inclusion of civil society organization that can help them to drive local actions, that can help them to develop conversation that people are talking about and what people are actually facing. All this kind of solution need to come up so that nobody will be left behind when we are looking at the sustainability of the action that we are taking.
All right, I'm going to get a final comment from you all. And Paula, let me start off with you, because ultimately we want to live in harmony with nature. If we do not implement some of the changes we have talked about on this program, and some of the changes the leaders have talked about over the years, what's next for the world in 20 years or 100 years?
I don't think we need to look for 20 years or 100 years. We can look at what's happening right now in many parts of the world. I think that we don't need to look forward and wait and see what happens. We know what's going to happen. We've seen whole civilizations go extinct because of their impact on the environment, and they've basically destroyed their ability to thrive. We will definitely see drier environments, more sickness, much more diseases like cancer diseases caused by effects of pollution. We will see much more poverty, much more conflict between people because of poverty, and much more political unrest. And this we are seeing in many parts of Africa already. We're seeing the consequences of that. We also just see whole value systems collapse when people become so determined only to survive from one day to the next day. that is all that their priorities become. And it's very hard to persuade such people to not pollute rivers or to not chop down that last tree when they're simply trying to survive. So we are at great risk here in Africa to destroy so much of what we have. We have seen the loss of large mammals from North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Australia. They have lost so many of their large mammals. Africa is still the bastion of these large, iconic mammal species. And these animals inspire young people all over the globe.
All right. Philip, your thoughts?
Yes, just to build on to what Paula has mentioned, I think a world that doesn't care about its a natural environment, a natural assets, is one that is bound to suffer all that she said. But it will be a world of scarcity, a world that is very expensive to live in, and a world full of diseases. Pandemics will increase, natural disasters, nature, holds floods. Forest, for example, holds floods, prevent floods from happening. If we are not careful, if we deforest a lot and we remove nature values from our people, the world will be a very, very difficult place. And we don't want that for ourselves or for future generations. So really my parting shot is, for a good, healthy life, take care of your environment. You're taking care of yourself.
Olumide, your parting shot as well.
As much as we know that government have a big role to play in this space of biodiversity, I think one of the things we need to start looking at is how can we individually also contribute to the implementation and the strategy and the outcome of our people and the planet. And also, as we know that biodiversity provides stability to the ecosystem, we need to start to understand that our life also is something that we need to take care of, because nature is life, and we need to start talking about something that is sustainable, and we need to start looking at our businesses as well to make sure that it's also sustainable. So taking care of nature is supposed to be key for everybody, not only for the government. And we seek for, like I said, transparency, accountability. We actually get us to where we want to be, and we keep us safe. Thank you very much.
Very interesting discussion indeed. Thank you all very much for being on the program. That's all we have time for this week on Talk Africa. But a big thank you to my guests, Olumide Idowu, co-founder, International Climate Change Development Initiative, Paula Kahumbu, CEO of Wildlife Direct, and one of the founders of the Hands Off Our Elephants campaign, and Philip Murudi, Vice President, Conservation, Science and Planning, Species Protection at the African Wildlife Foundation. Remember, we'd love to hear your feedback through our social media handles on Facebook and on Twitter. And you can also catch the show on our YouTube playlist. Do keep the conversation going and tune in again next week for more Talk Africa. From me, Beatrice Marshall, and the team in Nairobi, until next week, stay safe and bye-bye.